A transit from Saturn opposing your natal Ketu, the south node of the moon, is a profound, fated, and structurally defining period of karmic liberation and future-oriented alignment. Occurring roughly every 29 years, this transit sets up an intense 180° circpolarization between the planet of structure, time, and absolute accountability, Saturn, and the lunar point of past life conditioning, familiar comfort zones, and instinctual dissolution, Ketu. Because the lunar nodes operate as an inseparable axis, transiting Saturn opposing your natal Ketu means it is simultaneously forming a direct, heavy conjunction with your natal Rahu, the north node of the moon. This configuration marks an evolutionary crossroads. Saturn clamps down on your tendency to retreat into old, safe behavioral patterns, forcing you to step out of the shadows of the past and begin the demanding, concrete labor of building your ultimate future destiny. The anatomy of the opposition, shaking the foundations of the comfort zone. To grasp the mechanics of this transit, one must look at the divergent energies of Saturn and Ketu. Ketu represents where we are inherently comfortable but evolutionary stagnant. It holds our inherited talents, deeply ingrained emotional defaults, and past life coping mechanisms. Ketu is a place of surrender, detachment, and sometimes, a passive refusal to engage with the demands of material reality. Saturn, conversely, is the planet of gravity, discipline, and effort. It demands that we take up space, accept responsibility, and build lasting tangible structures. When transiting Saturn opposes your natal Ketu, it acts as a structural critique of your escape hatches. Saturn directly challenges the areas of life where you have historically defaulted to passive avoidance, spiritual bypassing, or reliance on old, untested habits. It feels as though the cosmic floor beneath your familiar routines is being systematically inspected, forcing you out of your safe psychological hiding spots and dragging your focus toward the uncarved territory of your future. The closing of the escape hatches and the demise of complacency. The primary experiential hallmark of Saturn opposing your natal Ketu is a distinct sense of restriction or sudden exhaustion within your usual comfort zones. If you have historically relied on certain talents, family dynamics, or psychological defense mechanisms to coast through life without putting in real effort, Saturn will introduce structural roadblocks that render these defaults useless. During this phase, you might find that the people or environments that once provided unconditional comfort now demand that you step up as a mature adult, or they may simply become unavailable to you. This can initially induce an ambient feeling of isolation, existential fatigue, or a sense of fated grief as the doors to your past quietly lock behind you. However, this is not a punishment. Saturn is drying up the fertile soil of your complacency because it knows that staying in the Ketu comfort zone will ultimately cause your soul to atrophy. The cosmos is forcing you to stand on your own 2 feet, compelling you to stop hiding behind ancestral scripts or old identities. The alignment with Rahu, engineering the architecture of destiny. Because this transit occurs alongside Saturn's conjunction with your natal Rahu, the true evolutionary weight of this period lies in the absolute necessity of building a new path. Rahu represents the unfamiliar, intimidating, and hungry territory of your future growth. When Saturn sits directly on this point while opposing Ketu, it demands that you give form, skeleton, and material discipline to your highest life ambitions. You are being asked to take the raw, chaotic hunger of your Rahu desires and organize them through meticulous labor, routine, and strategy. You cannot merely daydream about your future anymore. Saturn forces you to deal with the logistics, the administrative duties, and the daily grind required to make those dreams a permanent reality. It is a period of intense apprenticeship to your own destiny, where you learn that true sovereignty is not handed to you by luck, but earned through unyielding consistency and structural integrity. The alchemical reward, conscious detachment and sovereign flight. Ultimately, the evolutionary purpose of transiting Saturn opposing your natal Ketu is to change your relationship with your past from one of codependency to one of mastery. Left to itself, Ketu can trap you in loops of nostalgia, spiritual stagnation, or habitual avoidance. Saturn's direct opposition acts as a grounding rod that crystallizes the best elements of your past while cutting away the toxic residue. When you stop fighting the closure of your old escape routes and commit to the hard work of building your future, a beautiful shift occurs. You no longer use your past talents as a shield against the world. Instead, they become a stable, integrated launchpad. The dismantling of ancestral guilt and the pruning of inherited shadows. As the Saturn Ketu opposition digs deeper into the layers of your subconscious, its fated focus extends beyond your personal habits and plunges straight into the subterranean world of ancestral conditioning and genetic baggage. Ketu rules our lineage, the unexpressed grief, the unwritten laws, the hidden shame, and the psychological defaults of those who came before us. It is the repository of your family system's psychic defaults. When Saturn places itself directly opposite this point, it acts as a cosmic surveyor, demands a full structural inspection of your lineage's shadow dynamics. During this profound phase, you may find yourself carrying an inexplicable, heavy weight of ancestral guilt or navigating complex family crises that force you to reevaluate your role within your biological tribe. Saturn isolates you from the collective warmth of the family matrix, forcing you to look at your relatives and your upbringing with a clinical, unsentimental eye. You are pushed to see where you have been unconsciously living out scripts that do not belong to you, such as repeating a parent's financial scarcity mindset, enduring toxic relationship dynamics out of misplaced loyalty, or practicing a form of martyrdom that has passed down through generations. The evolutionary mandate of this transit is the absolute cessation of these inherited cycles. Saturn forces you to act as the spiritual cleanup crew for your entire lineage. By bringing these buried patterns into the cold light of day, the transit demands that you say, "The energetic debt of this pattern ends with me." This process can feel profoundly lonely, akin to being in exile from your own history. Yet, it is an act of supreme psychological liberation. Saturn is giving you the structural tools to consciously edit your heritage, allowing you to retain the authentic strength and talent of your ancestors while permanently shutting down the generational conduits of trauma and dysfunction. The breakdown of pseudo-spiritual detachment and hyper-independence. A significant, hidden trap of the Ketu archetype is its tendency toward toxic detachment, nihilism, or a hyper-independent isolation masquerading as high spiritual evolution. Because Ketu inherently seeks to dissolve boundaries and withdraw from the exhausting friction of material reality, it can easily create a personality that uses phrases like "everything is an illusion" or "I don't need anything from the world" as a sophisticated psychological shield against the fear of failure, intimacy, or rejection. When Saturn anchors itself on the opposite side of this axis, it ruthlessly shatters this pseudo-spiritual armor. Under Saturn's direct glare, your absolute detachment is tested by the unyielding demands of the real world. If you have neglected your financial stability, your legal responsibilities, or the structural needs of your human relationships under the guise of spiritual transcendence, Saturn will introduce consequences that pull you violently back down to earth. You may face sudden material crises, bureaucratic emergencies, or relationship collapses that cannot be solved through meditation, visualization, or passive surrender. Saturn forces you to realize that avoiding the material world is not a sign of enlightenment, but an act of cowardice. The transit demands that you build a functional, accountable relationship with reality. You are being pushed to trade your fragile, defensive hyperindependence for a rugged, mature interdependence. You are forced to learn how to open your heart to the messy, unpredictable, and vulnerable reality of human connection, discovering that true spiritual mastery is found not by fleeing the material plane, but by staying fully present within it and taking absolute responsibility for your creation. The birth of the self-sustaining pioneer, from default to architect. The ultimate evolutionary triumph of navigating a Saturn opposition Ketu transit is the total, irreversible rewiring of your personal authority mechanism. Prior to this alignment, your identity likely operated on a series of automated, instinctual defaults. You moved toward paths that felt easy, safe, and familiar because your subconscious memory knew exactly how to navigate them. You were a creature of habit, running on the momentum of your past. Saturn's heavy opposition permanently cuts the power to these automated circuits. By making your old default settings incredibly painful, restrictive, or entirely unavailable, Saturn forces you to consciously design your life from scratch. This transit shifts you from a passive consumer of your past karma to an active architect of your future destiny, Rahu. You learn to tolerate the high anxiety of moving into unfamiliar territory, whether that means starting an entirely new career path, building an unconventional lifestyle, or embodying a completely original aspect of your personality. The purging of somatic memory and the mastery of fluid boundaries. As the final waves of the Saturn-Ketu opposition break across your psychological landscape, the transit makes its deepest descent into the somatic and energetic memory banks of the body. Ketu represents our unvocalized, cellular memory, the instinctual trauma responses, the automatic nervous system contractions, and the phantom anxieties that have no clear origin in our current waking life. Because Ketu is a porous, highly impressionable point, it easily stores the collective psychic residue of our past environments. When Saturn sets up its rigid, cold opposition, it acts as a high-pressure filter that forces these buried somatic scripts out of the tissues and into conscious awareness. During this deep alchemical stage, you may experience periods of profound physical lethargy, strange waves of melancholy, or a sensation that you are physically sloughing off an old skin. Activities, foods, or environments that you previously used to soothe your nervous system may suddenly feel toxic or entirely ineffective. Saturn is dismantling your chemical and energetic dependencies on the past. It demands that you build structural, conscious boundaries around your physical body and your energetic field. You are forced to learn how to actively clear your space, establish rigorous routines of physical detoxification, and consciously track where your body is reacting out of ancient, outmoded fear rather than present-day reality. By teaching your nervous system to stay open and grounded even when the phantom ghosts of past failures whisper in your ear, Saturn transitions you away from being a helpless, porous sponge for old karma. You emerge with your physical vehicle highly fortified, possessing a deeply regulated, clean, and crystalline somatic presence that can no longer be hijacked by the emotional currents of your environment. The refinement of instinct into conscious, strategized wisdom. On an intellectual and operational level, a major challenge of the Ketu archetype is its heavy reliance on blind instinct, unexamined talent, and casual improvisation. Because Ketu represents domains where we have already achieved proficiency in past iterations of our journey, we often default to a lazy, unstrategized brilliance when dealing with its themes. We don't think about how we do what we do, we just glide through on talent. When Saturn introduces its uncompromising opposition, this era of effortless, unrefined gliding comes to a definitive end. Saturn demands a strict accounting of your gifts. If you are a natural healer, a born artist, an intuitive leader, or a brilliant communicator, Saturn's opposition will present challenges that cannot be solved by charm or raw talent alone. You will be forced to explain your methods, build repeatable systems, document your processes, and subject your gifts to the harsh metrics of the material market or professional institutions. It can feel as though Saturn is stripping the magic away from your natural abilities, rendering them tedious and mechanical. However, this process is actually an elite masterclass in sustainability. Saturn is turning your fragile, chaotic instinct into conscious, reliable, and structural wisdom. By forcing you to study the mechanics of your own genius and build a disciplined framework around it, the transit ensures that your talents are no longer volatile flashes in the pan. You learn how to weaponize your natural gifts with strategic precision, shifting from an erratic amateur into a seasoned, bulletproof professional whose work can withstand any level of objective scrutiny. The final deliverance, walking between the worlds with absolute gravity. When the separating degrees of the Saturn-Ketu opposition finally widen and the intense, contracting pressure on your past defaults permanently releases, you realize that the cosmic architecture of your life has been completely re-engineered. You do not leave this transit with a sense of loud, triumphant euphoria, rather, you emerge with the heavy, silent, and incredibly dense composure of an ultimate initiate. You walk back into the world possessing the rare ability to stand firmly planted in the material plane while remaining entirely unattached to its illusions. The ultimate gift of a successfully integrated Saturn-Ketu process is that you no longer need your past to define you, nor do you fear its return. You have paid the structural taxes of your lineage, closed the doors on your defensive escape hatches, and channeled your soul's deepest desires into concrete, lasting, and monumental structures on the side of your Rahu destiny. You stand precisely at the center of your own timeline, honoring the depth of where you have been, but looking forward with absolute clarity, walking with the quiet gravity of a person who has mastered the past and earned the absolute right to write their own future. Subscribe, like, and share.